अस्सलाम वालेकुम ख़ातिन हज़रात, मैं हूँ इसरार कसना। ख़ातिन हज़रात, इस वक्त अफ़गानिस्तान की जो सिचुएशन है वो हर लम्हा के हिसाब से बदलती जा रही है और हम देख रहे हैं कि अफ़गानिस्तान में जो तालिबान के एडवांसेस हैं वो बढ़ रहे हैं। इंटरनली हम देख रहे हैं सिचुएशन जो है वो तब्दील होती जा रही है और एक्सटर्नली भी हम देख रहे हैं कि मुख्तलिफ लोगों के मुख्तलिफ ममालिक के जो स्टैंड्स हैं वो आपके सामने आते जा रहे हैं। भारत को आप देख रहे हैं, इंडिया को, अमेरिका को देख रहे हैं। वो अपने अपने तौर पर ये एक स्केयर जो है वो फैला रहे हैं कि तालिबान की हुकूमत आएगी तो पता नहीं क्या हो जाएगा, किस तरीके से होगा। और ये लोग जो हैं वो बड़े भयानक किस्म के लोग हैं, ये इंसानियत से गिरे हुए लोग हैं और ये जनाब मार देते हैं लोगों को, तशद्दुद करते हैं, औरतों का कोई हाल नहीं होगा, इस तरह की चीज़ें कर रहे हैं। तो अब ये जो सिचुएशन है इसमें होगा क्या, ये तो अल्लाह बेहतर जानता है। लेकिन इसका तज्जिया करने के लिए मैंने आज सोचा कि हम एक ऐसी शख्सियत को दावत दें जो तालिबान को हमसे ज़्यादा जानते हैं। मेरी मुराद डॉक्टर इवान रिडली से है। डॉक्टर इवान रिडली के बारे में आपको जानते हैं कि वो एक जर्नलिस्ट थी और वो अफगानिस्तान गई थी तालिबान के दौरे हुकूमत में, तो वहाँ पे उनको किडनैप कर लिया गया था और उनकी कैप्टिविटी में रही तकरीबन 11 दिन। और कैप्टिविटी में रहने के बाद फिर वो आई और फिर उन्होंने इस्लाम के बारे में पढ़ा, तो फिर उन्होंने इस्लाम कबूल कर लिया। तो हम उनको कहते हैं कि फ्रॉम अ कैप्टिव टू अ कॉन्वर्ट। तो उनसे आज बात करेंगे, उनसे ज़्यादा तालिबान को कौन जानता होगा, और हम उनसे पूछेंगे कि वो इस बारे से क्या जानती हैं और उनका क्या ख्याल है। सो आई वेलकम डॉक्टर इवान रिडली। अस्सलाम वालेकुम डॉक्टर इवान रिडली।
Walaikum salam, and thank you for inviting me onto your show.
Nice to see you after 13 months.
Yes, it's been a long time. A lot has happened in that time, especially in Afghanistan.
In Afghanistan, and Dr. Ivan, the longest war of the US has just ended, almost ended.
Mhm.
And the Americans actually left Bagram Air Base in the middle of the night without any ceremonies, without any handing overs. And on the other side, we are witnessing that Taliban are advancing very rapidly. And the Afghan forces are surrendering without even putting up any resistance. And internationally, we are seeing 3 Ds. One is dehumanize the Taliban, delegitimize them, and demonize them. So first of all, tell me, why are they doing it? Especially when they were dying for a deal with the Taliban, and Pakistan facilitated that deal. And now after making that deal, they are demonizing and delegitimizing and dehumanizing the Taliban. Why?
Well, it's lazy journalism. That's all I can say. And, I think the scale of the retreat and the collapse of the Afghan government forces has taken everyone by surprise. Even people in Afghanistan are stunned by the scale and speed of the security forces collapse. And, it's a very fast-moving story. Things may well have changed in the next few hours before we go to air. So it really is a fast-moving story. Why the West continues to demonize the Taliban while sitting down trying to broker peace talks with them, it's beyond me. The Taliban, whether you like them or not, and people like them and love them in equal measure, the Taliban have been constant throughout. Their demands have never changed. People forget, that the Taliban are Afghans. They love their country.
Absolutely.
And they wanted all the foreign forces out, which is not an unreasonable request if you love your country. America has sneaked off, as you said, but they did that in Iraq as well. No victory there. They quietly retreated from Iraq, and they've done the same in Afghanistan. I can understand people being alarmed. And, the Taliban have been demonized for 20 years. And unfortunately, this sort of propaganda is very hard to unravel once you've thrown mud it's very difficult then to try and backtrack on the things that have been said. But the Taliban have motored on throughout. They've never wavered in their demands, and they've sat down with the Americans in Qatar and tried to roll out peace deals. And now Afghanistan's neighbours are stepping up efforts to try and prevent the collapse of the entire country into a full-blown civil war.
Right.
The reality is, it's not if the Taliban are going to take over, it is when the Taliban take over. And they've had a lot of guidance while the leadership has been in, partly in Qatar and elsewhere. And I think that we'll see a much more mature government when the Taliban do take over.
Well, as you said, Dr. Yvonne, as you said, that it's just a matter of time. So what would this government look like, Taliban government? They are actually claiming that it will be a broad-based government, but what would it look like?
I think that it will. I think that as long as they are given support and help, and help in terms of humanitarian aid, not military help. I think that in terms of support, I think that the Taliban government will be quite a different, more tolerant entity than there was back in the 1990s when they came to power. You know, what a lot of people forget is under the leadership of Mullah Omar, the Taliban never had ambitions to form a government to take control of the country. It was more or less forced on them by circumstances. And very much as has happened in parts of Afghanistan today, when they came to power, they were welcomed into various provinces rather than meet any great resistance. And this is something that Western journalists are unwilling to accept at the moment, that a lot of people are welcoming them back because they are sick of the corrupt ways of the current government.
Right.
And it is a corrupt government, whether we like it or not. I'm not saying the Taliban are going to be perfect, but
nobody is perfect, right?
No, that's right. But I think that they will indeed surprise a lot of people, and their neighbours are trying to, give some support. In fact, I think on Friday there was a meeting in Uzbekistan with dozens of leaders and foreign ministers from the regional powers. And I think that Afghan President Ashraf Ghani has to be realistic about his expectations.
But Yvonne, should there be a Taliban government in Afghanistan? The world community should be concerned about it, or they should not? And if not, why not?
Well, it's up to the Afghan people who they want to govern them, and they're clearly not happy with the government they have at the moment, and that's obvious by the rapid arrival of the Taliban all around Kabul and the major cities. So it's up to the Afghan people, really. I would like to think that the West will be supportive or give a supporting role without interfering or meddling or giving sort of conditions attached
do you think
to aid.
UK minister's statement saying that we will work with Taliban is a welcome step?
It's a necessary step. As I say, it's whether people like it or not, the Taliban will be in power very soon. and the reaction of the international community will be reflected in the reaction of those in power. If the West is there in a supportive role, a genuinely supportive role, then I'm sure they'll be welcomed. However, if they start talking down to the Taliban and trying to lecture them on how to run their own country, that isn't going to go down well.
So what do you think, Yvonne? You know them. I think you are the best placed person to know Taliban right now. Are these Taliban same as the Taliban you dealt with, or they are different?
I think in a lot of ways, while they have held on to their ideology, I think that they are a much more mature thinking leadership. I think that they realize that they can't withdraw or retreat into an Islamic bubble. I think they realize that they're going to have to reach out to the regional powers, to the wider powers. As I say, I think, you know, they've had 20 years to think about this. And I think that this is something that they will, I think they'll surprise quite a few people at the maturity of their thinking, of the wisdom of their thinking. And I can understand why a lot of Afghans are concerned, and people are saying, oh, what about the poor Afghan women? Well, I can say, you know, for the last 20 years, the lot of the poor Afghan women hasn't been greatly improved by the arrival of US forces. Far from it. In fact, when you look at the progress women have made in 20 years under a US occupation, it's quite poor and quite shocking. So, you know, let's not look misty-eyed back over the last 20 years and think that women's rights have leapfrogged. They haven't. You know, there are green shoots in the capital. There are, you know, the arrival of senior women in the services, but it's not. It could have been much more developed.
So one part of that demonization process is the same thing which you're talking now about women and girls' education under Taliban. People are saying that no, if Taliban are back, you know, there'll be no education for women and girls' education, so no jobs for women. So do you think Taliban are that kind of like Stone Age people? They don't understand these kind of niceties and intricacies involved in the whole process?
It is a big lie that the Taliban did not have girls' schools. What the Taliban refused to do was adopt or take on board a Western curriculum. And so that is important. I went back to Afghanistan in February 2002 when the university in Kabul was reopening after what people thought was the end of the war. And when I was there, more girls than boys passed the entrance exam. Well, if girls weren't educated, how did that happen? I put my hand up at a press conference and said, if the Taliban did not educate girls, please tell me how more girls than boys passed the entrance exam for the university. What the Taliban refused to do was adopt a Western curriculum for their children, which is their right. We certainly in the West would not want the Taliban telling us how to educate our children. And it's a two-way passage. You know, we are from different cultures that don't necessarily travel that well. So it is a big lie to say that the Taliban didn't educate girls. However, I will say that a lot of schools were closed under the Taliban rule for no other reason that they had no money, they had no support from the West, and they had been cut off from European funding as well. So what I would urge the West is do not abandon Afghanistan. Please, whoever is in power, help them with humanitarian aid, with support, with grants, and continue to support them.
Right. So we are also looking at one other important thing, and that is the Taliban's diplomatic efforts, especially reaching out to different countries like Moscow and China and stuff like that. So they are actually more concerned about the development and connectivity in the region. That is why we are witnessing this conference in Uzbekistan where Imran Khan is there still. Do you think they have a different paradigm now? As you said earlier, that the leadership is more mature, more educated. I saw different spokesmen of Taliban speaking in English. So
yes,
it's a different Taliban right now.
Yes, but their neighbors are quite different as well. They've got Pakistan's Imran Khan, who is quite a different character to, well, let's face it, General Pervez Musharraf was a puppet of America. Imran Khan is certainly not that. And I think that he very much has great ambitions for Pakistan, but I also think it's in his interests to make sure that there is a peaceful outcome in neighboring Afghanistan. And I think that in the right sort of climate, that Afghanistan and Pakistan could be quite productive in terms of trade and being good neighbors. Then, of course, the Russians, the Chinese, and Indian foreign ministers are also, attended the conference in Uzbekistan. Turkey has an interesting role to play, and I know that Turkey has a footprint in a variety of Muslim countries, but the Taliban have made it quite clear that whatever government and country they have, it will not be occupied again, either by guests or friends or foe. The Taliban very much want to be their own, lead their own destiny.
And I think they're right, because if Turkey is planning to station their troops there just to guard the airport, it can create trouble with not just Afghanistan Taliban, but also with Pakistan too.
Yes,
it can create a lot of tension between the three countries.
That's right. And then on top of, although I happen to think that Turkey would be a force for good, and relations between Pakistan and Turkey are very good as well. But maybe, we see these regional powers coming to deliver more productive things to the Afghan table. And then there's Tajikistan, Kazakhstan, and Kyrgyzstan. They have their top diplomats at this meeting, as well as Antonio Guterres, from the UN's Secretary General. So there's a lot of important people there, a lot of genuine support and help for the Taliban. The climate is quite different now to how it was more than 20 years ago. The aggressive, domineering America that we knew back then under George W. Bush has now given way to a much more thoughtful and less aggressive leadership in the Joe Biden administration.
Right. So you just talked about India. How big a setback is this for India? Because they have invested a lot of time, energy, a lot of money in Afghanistan, and now they are back to square one.
Well, you know, you look at the motives of all of the different leaders in Uzbekistan, and I would say the ones with the most calculating, mischievous motives probably come from the Indian government. It's not in their interest to have a peaceful Afghanistan. And I say that because you've got this nuclear power, India, right next to Pakistan, and there's a lot of aggressive talk between the two countries, a lot of posturing, a lot of gesturing, and it would be in India's interests if the Pakistan military was diluted on at least two fighting fronts,
Right.
one being on the Indian Kashmir borders, and the other being on the Afghan borders. So I have to question India's motives. I don't think they're an honest broker. I'd love to be proved wrong. I'm quite happy to eat humble pie and apologize, but I don't trust Narendra Modi.
Do you think that in this situation, Indians will try to destabilize Afghanistan, not just Afghanistan, but Pakistan too, because we have already seen a lot of sabotage activities in Pakistan, because yesterday there were 9 Chinese engineers who were killed. So things are already starting up.
Yes, well, let's hope that the Chinese show some restraint. I have a feeling that they will. India will be called out if it's caught up to any subversive activity, and I think that that India will have its wings clipped at this this conference. I think that is going to be certainly one of the things. The other thing is, you know, the Afghans are not idiots. They're very clever people, and they know when they're being used and when they're being played. And they also know how fickle the international community is. And when I say the Afghans, you know, I'm not just talking about Ghani's government, I'm talking about the Taliban. So I think it would be very difficult for them to be hoodwinked. You know, the Taliban have had years and years to think about this this moment that they're reaching. And they could have accelerated it much earlier if they had met the demands, but they held out and held out and until this moment came. And as I say, the advance that they've made in recent weeks has taken everyone by surprise. But they are proposing a ceasefire in Afghanistan for 3 months in return for the release of 7,000 Taliban fighters that are in the prisons. Now, then this, it's my understanding that this deal was offered to the Afghan government, was offered to Ashraf Ghani quite a while ago, and he ignored it and dismissed it and refused to do this. And of course, you know, they're asking him nicely now, but if he continues with this bluff and bluster, it's not going to end well for him.
Right. So if your personal question, actually, if Taliban are back, would you like to go back to Afghanistan in near future?
I've been back to Afghanistan many times since my arrest, but I have spoken to the Taliban. I'm in a happy position where I don't think I have any enemies in Afghanistan. I have a great love and respect for the Afghan people. And I just, you know, like many people around the world who visited Afghanistan and fallen in love with the country, you know, we all are praying for peace. We're all praying that the country resolves its differences internally and goes on to become the great nation that it deserves to be.
Absolutely. Before I let you go, Yvonne, one thing which is very important. We started with, the story of Bagram, and the story of Bagram is basically a story of torture and pain. And when it comes to the torture, there is another story of prisoner 650, right? So Afia Siddiqui. So Robert Fisk called her the Grey Lady of Bagram, right? So isn't it time for the US to release her and end her ordeal?
Yes, it is. And I would love to see, although she's a Pakistani woman, I would love to see the Taliban say to the Americans that they would, one of their demands would be that she would be handed over,
Right.
so that she can return to her home and her children in Pakistan. And that would be the icing on the cake.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Thank you very much, Dr. Yvonne. Thank you for your time, and
Thank
wish
you.
you great luck, and wish Afghanistan great luck, because
Absolutely.
very important. I think they deserve a lot better than this. You see, they have been suffering for decades now, so they
Yes,
deserve much better.
absolutely.
Thank you very much for your time, and see you soon, inshallah.
Thank you.
Thank
Salam
you.
alaikum.
Assalamu alaikum.